All right, so let's get started in the interest of starting on time. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for joining us during your lunchtime. I'm really excited to share some more information on how to get started on your grad school and law school applications. My name is Alicia. I'm a pre-grad advisor here at UCSD Career Center, and I'm also a fifth-year PhD student in the neurosciences program at UCSD. And we're really lucky to be joined by my supervisor, Marcy Morrison, who's the Associate Director for Career Development and Industry Engagement. Marcy, if you want to just quickly say hi.
Hi, everyone. I know I've met a lot of you, and I know Alicia has probably met many of you too, and just excited. We realized that for everyone, it's really good to start this information early. So thanks for being ahead of the game with us, and thanks for Alicia for walking us through the steps that you can do to get started with your application planning. So turning it back to you, Alicia. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to kind of go through what the application materials are. We'll go through kind of a proposed and suggested timeline for your applications, more specifics into what you can do to make yourself a competitive applicant, and then we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. That being said, feel free to throw your questions into the chat as we go. And Marcy we'll be monitoring the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end. You're also welcome to raise your hand at the end, but we'll get to those questions towards the end of the presentation. So with that, let's get started. So I really wanted to start with giving a brief overview of the application process and what the components are, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of them throughout the presentation. And so I wanted to introduce that before. So I want to start talking about the application materials. So the materials that you're going to be required to submit for your application are written statements. There may be one, there may be multiple, and we'll go more into that. An academic CV, a transcript, a copy of your transcript, letters of recommendation. It's usually around 3, 2 to 4 is pretty typical. And then potentially standardized test scores like the GRE or the LSAT. Now, after you submit your application, for a lot of graduate programs in STEM, so STEM PhD programs in law schools will have interviews. So what will happen is you'll submit your application. Application deadlines vary, but a lot of them are around December of each year. And then shortly after, you'll start hearing back from schools that would like to interview you and get more information from you. So that's part of the application process. At that time, after you submit, is also a good time to keep talking to faculty that you're interested in working with if you're applying for a PhD. It's also a good time to start contacting current students to get more information about what their experience is. And although at this point, you've narrowed down your school list to whatever programs you're interested in going to, chances are you might have more than one program that takes you in, and you're going to have to make a decision of which one to go to. So talking to students about what their experiences is a really important part of that process. And then lastly, time to commit to a program. It's where all your hard work pays off. We love, hearing your stories. So make sure that if you do come to the Career Center, always share your stories with us. It's the best part to hear about your guys' success. So with that, I'm going to start going through kind of a suggested roadmap. Now, I want to give a really strong disclaimer here that if you're joining us and you're a senior or you've even graduated, I don't want you to think that this means like, oh, I can't go to grad school because I didn't start 2 years before, right? We can always adopt these timelines for whatever fits for you and whatever your situation is. This is just a general recommendation of what to do before you apply. So 2+ years before, quite a while before you apply is when at this point we want to be thinking about maintaining a strong GPA. So now we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what a strong GPA means, but for the most part, just focusing on those classes actually is one of the best things you can do really early on. You also want to start participating, getting practical experience. Now that could mean research. It might mean joining a lab here on campus and doing research here at UCSD could mean getting an internship at a company nearby, mean participating in volunteer experiences. This is your time to really explore what you're passionate about. And this often forms the bulk of what your statements are going to be. And so it's really important at this time to start. This is your time to really kind of freely explore different interests that you think you might have. And ultimately, although we'll talk about specific experiences that can be beneficial, the most beneficial ones are the ones that you're passionate about. So if you find something and you really fall in love with it, and maybe you're a law school applicant and it's not an internship with the mayor, right? It's maybe something a little different. If you're really passionate about it and you're taking on a leadership role, then that's going to still be incredibly beneficial to your application. So whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that you're passionate about it, and that you're taking any opportunity that you have to do leadership experiences within those. This is also when you want to keep building strong relationships with potential letter writers. Now, your letter writers can be a wide variety of people. Of course, your professors are an option. So professors that you take courses with, you're welcome to, those will be strong candidates as far as writing your letters, but also any supervisors from internships, from jobs that you have, from volunteer positions that you have. Those could be fantastic letter writers as well. So any mentors that you get along the way that are in the field could be potential letter writers. So really making sure that you're building those relationships. And again, if you're joining us and you're kind of at the end of your undergraduate, or you've graduated and you maybe didn't form super strong relationships with your course professors, that's okay. We can chat about who are other people that you can ask to write your letters. And then this is a good time to start attending information sessions. So programs and schools will hold their own information sessions. It's very common for them during the summer, and then especially in the fall, and start attending those, because this is a really unique opportunity for you to ask those like program specific or school specific questions that, for example, us as broad advisors wouldn't have the answers to. So those are great opportunities, and strongly encourage that you do that. For law applicants, about 1 year before you apply, it's recommended that you take a practice LSAT to kind of see where you're at and see how that matches with your with some potential target schools. Now we move to 6 months before. This is when it's a good time, and even before, honestly, even a year before would be a good time as well, is to, if you haven't met with us here at the Career Center, make that initial appointment. I can't stress enough how busy things get in the fall. And because all applicants are trying to apply at the same time, appointments starting, I would say, October until December are really hard to come by. So if you want, a lot of feedback, or if you want to have the chance to meet with us kind of regularly before, please come as soon as possible, and definitely during the summer if you're planning on applying, so we can get started. This is also when you want to start creating a school list, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to do that, because it's one of those things that's a little bit different than undergrad. And a lot of you probably remember the target safety reach model, and that's a little bit more difficult to make it for graduate school. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You also want to develop a tracking system for your deadlines. A lot of people like Excel. I'm sure there are many fancier programs now at this point. We don't care what you use, but please use something, right? So start tracking, when are the applications due? What are the application components? Which statements will you have to submit? Things like that. This is when you want, and apologies for that typo, this is when you want to start, begin drafting your written statements. So it's early, you still have lots of time to work on them, but start thinking about what's going to go into them and outlining that. And then 6 months before is when you would ideally take your LSAT or begin preparing for your GRE or GMAT. Now to 3 months before, this is when if you are retaking your LSAT, you should retake your LSAT. This is also when you should take your GRE or GMAT. The latest that you should take the GRE for graduate school is October. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that you're not going to be the only one who wants to take the GRE in October. So do book those dates really early if you want them. This is when you're going to want 3 months before is when you should make contact with your letter writers and ask them for those letters. Now, you could have asked them a long time ago, and that's totally fine as well. But 3 months before, if you've already asked them, then make contact again. And if you haven't, this is when you should be making initial contact and asking them for those letters. This is when you can start reaching out to professors that are in the programs that you're applying to. Now, I wouldn't say this is necessary. You can definitely wait until after you've applied to do this, but this might help you narrow down your school list. So especially for PhDs where you're going to be working really closely one-on-one with professors, you may want to know which professors are available to mentor and available to be on your committee or to be your direct advisor, right? And so if that's going to help you determine which schools and which applications to complete, then this would be when you would want to start doing that. We want to start creating your academic CV. It's a little bit different than a traditional CV. So, and we have some examples here in this presentation. And then 3 months before is typically when applications start to open. So this is a good time to create your login and your password, put that into your tracking system, and maybe even just kind of start clicking through what's going to be required in the application. The last step is 4 to 6 weeks before. This is when we really want to be filling out those applications. Students often underestimate the amount of time it takes to fill out all of the demographic information. Sometimes applications will ask you to, for example, input your CV field by field, and this ends up taking a lot of time if you have lots of applications going. So don't start filling out, your name, your address, whatever, until this last second, because it will take longer than you think. Follow up with your letter writers. At this point, the way that the letters get submitted is that once you create your application, you'll input their email. They'll then receive an email that gives them a portal to submit your letter. You'll be able to see if they have submitted your letter on your behalf. Again, I can't stress the importance of really following up with your letter writers. This is the time where I wouldn't worry about being annoying, and it's really, really important that they submit those letters, right? So if that means sending a reminder email once a week, I actually wouldn't be afraid to do that, because we do have some really unfortunate cases where letter writers just don't get in time, and it's like the one component of the application that we have the least control over, and so we just want to make sure to avoid any issues with those letters as much as possible. We also want to be finalizing your statements at this point. So this is when hopefully your statements are written by now, and we're just kind of going through and really focusing on that organization. Perhaps this would be a good time to meet with the writing center, the writing hub that we have here at UCSD, and really focus maybe on like the grammar aspect and structure, some more nitty-gritty aspects of your statement. It's also a good time to have somebody in your field review your application. Now, all these things can be done way before 4 to 6 weeks, right? But this is kind of, at this point, you really want to have this set. Although, we're excited about working with you and we can't wait to meet with you one-on-one and work with you on your applications, it's really invaluable to get the input from somebody who has been through that program or is currently going through that program. So if you're applying to a biology PhD and you're in a lab and you're surrounded by PhD students, take advantage of their knowledge. They just did it successfully, right? So take advantage of that and have them look at your statements. Same thing if you're in an internship and you're surrounded by people who have just done a master's in computer science, take advantage of those of their expertise and have them, ask them if they can take a look at your materials. And this also is a time where you can continue to reach out to professors that you might be interested in working with. So I know this is text heavy, but bear with me. There's lots of good information here, and I will be uploading the slides at the end. So if you're worried about getting these links, don't worry. And we'll also have this video posted on our Career Center YouTube. So as far as making yourself a competitive applicant, I want to go a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of the things that I've mentioned so far. So I talked about the GPA and the GRE. and specific, well, GRE and other standardized tests, right? The LSAT or the GMAT. As far as GPA goes, everyone always asks me, what does a strong GPA mean? It's tough because every school will have, and every program within every school will have different kind of limits and averages based on their applicants. However, I would say that a lot of programs will have a minimum GPA of 3.0. That being said, if you don't have a 3.0, please don't freak out. Come see us, let's chat. I personally know grad students who have successfully navigated the admissions process with below a 3.0. So let's still chat, but if at all possible to keep it above that limit, that does really open doors for you. Like I said, a lot of students will often ask us, you know, like, how important is my GPA? And we wish we could answer these questions, but these are just incredibly program specific questions, right? So when you're applying to a school and specifically a program within that school, they're going to have their own admissions rubric where they're going to decide how much the GPA is weighed. And so unfortunately, we don't know. And what I will say is your best bet at finding out as much as you can about how much the GPA is weighed is talking to students who are currently in the program. So using that networking, using informational interviewing. And if you don't know what that is, please come to the Career Center and chat with us about it. And connecting with students that are in the program and asking them, you know, do you know, like, what was your GPA? What was your friend's GPAs? Do you know if there's a cutoff? Things like that. Letters of recommendation. I want to say this is almost like the scariest part of the application, like I said, because it's the part that we have the least control over. That being said, there's so many resources out there to help you ensure that you get a fantastic letter. This is just a little statistic that's kind of old at this point, to be honest, but it's actually still very relevant. A lot of admissions directors that I've spoken to will say that the letters of recommendation are the #1 most important part of the application. Now, like I said, with the GPA, how different programs rank those things varies. And I won't say that every program feels that way, but in general, your letters are very important. So making sure that you're choosing the right people to write your letters and that they're going to write and setting them up to write you the best letter possible. And that looks something like not asking them last minute. Asking somebody for a letter any closer than 6 weeks before is considered unprofessional. We would recommend against doing that. Providing your letter writers with your application components. The strongest letters are the letters that basically confirm what you write in your statements or what you have on your CV. And not only is that a strong, you know, a really good sign for the admissions committee, but it makes it so much easier for your letter writer to write because they can actually just basically pull things from your statement and kind of rewrite it. And so you're lowering the kind of barrier to entry for them to write you a great letter. And that's the best thing that you can do. Academic CV, we have external and internal resources, examples, and of course, we're happy to walk you through your own CVs with our one-on-one advising appointments. In general, you just want to focus on the experience that you've had, and an academic CV is a little bit longer, so it gives you the opportunity to really go in depth into the major projects that you worked on for something, or the major responsibilities that you had for an internship or a research position. Interviews, we talked about briefly. They're typically only for doctoral programs, including law schools. We have great resources to do interview practice, and we also do mock interviews here at the Career Center. This is also a really good time to talk to people who are in your fields because they're going to be able to tell you the exact types of questions that they got when they interviewed last year or 2 years before, right? So if you know anyone who's gotten the degree or who's currently in the degree that you want to get, talk to them, ask them what their interview was like. And then the last little thing is some programs will require proof of English proficiency. So let's talk about practical experience. You know, in my timeline, I said 2+ years before start getting practical experience. Now, I'm not saying you need exactly 2 years of experience to get in. That's not what I mean. But the more practical experience you have, the better it is for your admissions for a number of reasons. Versus on your CV, you know, it's important to show the committee that you've had strong experience in the field that you're trying to go into. But also it gives us something to really talk about in your statements, right? In these written statements, which we'll talk about in a second. It allows the admissions committee to find out more about you and what makes you you and what you're passionate about, right? So if you've participated in these experiences and you're able to speak to what you liked, what you learned, how it made you realize that you wanted to go into a certain field. Those are all the things that we want to touch on, and we can't do that if you haven't had these experiences. So I know that it's really easy to say, you know, go out and have experiences, but I recognize that it's really hard to get them, and especially since we're still, you know, coming out of COVID, these are, you know, more challenging times than before to get these experiences. So I want to talk a little bit more about how to do that. If you are trying to find a research experience, you know, I said joining a lab here at UCSD. UCSD has an incredible network of research institutions. So it's not just the labs here at UCSD, but we have so many affiliated research institutions, the Salk Institute, Scripps Research Institute, Sanford Consortium for Regenerative Medicine, right? This is being at UCSD. If you're interested in research, there's really no place in the world like it. To be able to find a lab, I recommend that you talk to your professors and your graduate student TAs. You can reach out directly to professors that you're interested in working with. We call it cold emailing. It's going to take some persistence, but keep at it. But the reason that I mentioned talking to your current professors is if you talk to a professor, you connect with them and you say, you know what, I'm really interested in working with your colleague. They might be able to provide that warm introduction. And that's really all you need, right? Is for your email to not end up in the long, long list of unread emails of some PI. Same thing with your graduate student TAs. Even if you're not interested in joining the lab that your TAs are in, they might have friends that are in the lab that you want to join. They might be able to, the professor whose lab you might want to join might be on their committee, right? There might be ways to make that introduction. You can also check out the Real portal. It's where a lot of research opportunities are posted within UCSD. And then there's actually lots of opportunities through the Undergraduate Research Hub. I strongly recommend checking out their websites. There's lots of fellowships that you can apply for that will allow you to do research at UCSD and our affiliated institutions. Internships, summer internships, a lot of applications are actually due in the fall. So although there's still, you know, some things that are open for this summer, starting early is the best thing that you can do. And looking on Handshake, all of our internship opportunities are posted there, and also leveraging LinkedIn and Google to find those. Reach out to career advisors. We have advisors who are specialized in helping you connect with employers to secure internships. And in addition to that, attend our career fairs. So we have wonderful career fairs where employers come and specifically are looking for interns from UCSD. So that's a unique opportunity to do that. And then you can also use the Real portal. The Real portal also has internship opportunities. And lastly, I'll talk about, just mention informational interviews, networking within your field and talking to people who are in the careers that you want to go into. It's beneficial for so many reasons, right? You're building a network and you're finding out more about, you're doing career development, you're finding out more about what you're interested in. But you might find a lot of times that they'll ask you, you know, at the end of the interview, they might ask you, you know, what's your plan? What are your interests? And if you mention that you're looking for an internship, you never know who's going to help you get that CV in front of a hiring manager. Now, I would never go into an informational interview with that expectation. People can sense if you're just using them, and that doesn't facilitate, you know, honest exchange. But I I do think that it's a way to do the networking you need to secure those internships. Last is anything that gets you leadership, teaching, or outreach experience. So getting involved with student organizations here on campus, we have so many of them, and obtaining leadership positions, working with local school districts, mentoring high school students, volunteering as a tutor, getting involved in doing science outreach. So all the time I see local high schools looking for like science fair judges. That's what I would recommend as far as other experiences, but ultimately and holistically, what we're looking for is what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? Never do participate in an experience because you think it will look good. It might, but really at the end, your passion will come through. And so following the things that you are most interested in is what I believe will benefit you the most. I think a lot of students sometimes ask, like, how many things should I be doing? Or like, I'm in this lab, but I'm also doing this internship for this company and I volunteer for this. That's great. And if you're balancing that well, that's fine. But we would rather you put yourself all into one experience and really get a ton out of it than you kind of, dabble in a bunch of different things without gaining any real depth. Lastly, talking about written statements, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I don't want to put you guys to sleep with all this text, but there's kind of 4 categories of statements that you might be asked. You might just be asked for one, you might be asked for all 4. The statement of purpose is the most common one that you'll definitely be asked for. Typically, the statement of purpose is when you get to talk about why do you want to come to this school? Why do you want to get this degree? What has prepared you for success in this program? Who do you want to work with? What kind of courses do you want to take, right? This is when we want to show the admissions committee that the program is a perfect fit for you and you are a perfect fit for the program. The personal statement can also be asked in addition to the statement of purpose. Now, the personal statement focuses more on your story and your path. A lot of times they'll ask you how your passion for the field developed and if you've encountered any challenges when pursuing your academic degree or this intended career that you want. This is your opportunity to talk more about personal achievements and challenges that you faced. And this is when an admissions committee asks for a personal statement, this is really important because admissions committees often are trying to create a cohort of students that are going to be able to benefit from each other, right? A very diverse cohort of students that can bring something to the table. The personal statement is your opportunity to talk about what you can bring to the table. There's the diversity statement. It's actually very often coupled with the personal statement. This is your opportunity to talk about anything related to diversity. Now, I've listed some things that the NIH describes as diversity categories, but I want everyone to not be limited by this list, really. Each and every one of you are different, and focusing on whatever your life experiences have been, whatever your challenges have been, is what's important here, more so than trying to tick boxes within these categories. This is often a time where graduate schools will ask you, how will you contribute to diversity in our program, right? And so thinking ahead of time, if you've had opportunities to mentor, for example, if you've tutored, things like that, that's why those opportunities become important in your statement. Then there's the COVID statement. This is probably going to be around for a little bit longer. This is optional, but it's your opportunity to talk about how the pandemic has affected you. If you were in school during the pandemic, there's no way it just didn't affect you, right? So this is extra space where you can talk about that, and we always recommend that students use it. There's also some optional essays, often, especially for law schools. We recommend that you do all of them, but those prompts can vary widely. but definitely always recommend doing the optional essays. For STEM PhDs, there's also the opportunity to have a research statement, and also strongly recommend that you fill this out. This is really just a more in-depth, nitty-gritty, scientifically, what did you do in your experiments? Now, getting to choosing a graduate program, and bear with me here, I know I've been talking for a while, but we are almost done, and it'll be time to get to all of your individual questions. And thanks so much, Marcy, I see the chat going, and thanks for answering as we go. So choosing a graduate program, creating a school list is tough for graduate programs. And the reason why that is because for undergrad, we have these great big books, and you open them and they have the list of all the undergrads, right? And they tell you like average SAT scores and GPAs, and it's pretty easy to figure out your reach target safety schools, and creating a school list is fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, we don't have a big book of graduate program. It just doesn't exist. There are many things that you can do to start creating that list, but it's not going to be quite as straightforward as for your undergraduate. So the first thing I mentioned, and this is important for programs that are going to lead to a career that requires licensure. So anything in counseling or therapy, any genetic counseling, anything that's going to require you to have a license to practice, you need to make sure that the program you go to is accredited by the licensing body. And the best way to do that is just to go to the licensing body's webpage. They always have a list of accredited programs. And that way you can make sure that you're in a program that's going to lead to the type of license that you need to do the job that you want. I hesitate to say this, but if I don't, somebody will ask me about it. You can use the US News and World Report rankings to check out program rankings. Now, the thing with program rankings is that it's subjective, right? It's what they think makes a program great, and what their priorities are may not match what your priorities are. I also strongly recommend against just taking the top 10 schools on the ranking and saying, that's it, that's my school list, right? There's so many things that need to go into you selecting a program that's the right fit for you. And it's going to make it really hard to write that statement about how you're the perfect fit for the program and they're the perfect fit for you if you didn't do this initial work. You can look for admission statistics on their web pages. Some programs will publish some stats like the average GPA of their incoming class or the average standardized test scores of their incoming class. This is especially true for law schools. There are many websites that you can basically put in your GPA and your LSAT score, and they give you kind of where you fall within admissions. Another disclaimer on that is that those two numbers are by far not the only things that are taken into account in admissions. So, and that's the reason why a lot of programs won't even publish them. And that's because just because you have a great GPA doesn't mean that you have enough research experience for a chemistry PhD. And just because you have a phenomenal GMAT score doesn't mean that you have the letters that are strong enough for a master's in finance, right? So there's so many things that go into admissions, and your application is reviewed holistically, which means everything is taken into consideration. That looking at just the admission statistics is a very narrow view of which programs could be a good fit. Lastly, I recommend talking to faculty and students that are in the field. They're the ones that know the programs that are the toughest to get into. Unlike undergrads where the rankings are, pretty widely available and known, as far as graduate programs go and law schools go, it's the individual programs that are ranked and not necessarily from their school, right? So that's not to say that schools like MIT and Harvard and Stanford won't have, highly ranked graduate programs. They probably do. But just because an institution might not be what you think is like the most highly ranked institution ever, some of their graduate programs may very well be at the top. And the way to find that out is to talk to people in the field. Next is important to look at program specifics. So the curriculum, you want to make sure there's classes in there that you're interested in taking and that are going to benefit you, right? Because otherwise it's just going to be like, it's going to be painful for those years that you need to be taking classes. The faculty, This is incredibly important, especially if you're doing a thesis. It's important for all programs, but if you're going to be working closely with one faculty member for something like a master's by thesis or a PhD, you want to make sure that the faculty that is at that school have research interests that align with yours. Opportunities, labs, internships, practicums. So if you're going to law school and you're particularly interested in a specific topic, you want to make sure that they have, and this goes in line with the extracurricular activities, right? You want to make sure they have clinics that you could participate in to get more experience in that topic. If you, for example, are going into a counseling program and you really want to work with the veteran population, you want to make sure that you can do your internship at the VA. Do they have a partnership with the VA, right? Things like that, things to think about. How is this going to kind of set me up for success in my career? The last is considering feasibility and future goals. Location. This seems obvious, but I can't tell you how many students make up this school list and they show it to me, and a ton of them are in Boston. And I'm like, oh, do you like the snow or like the cold? And they're like, oh no, I hate the cold. You're going to be there for a long time, right? And the environment that you're in plays a really important role in your well-being. And so considering location-wise, and maybe you have family ties, right? Maybe you have a significant other. Considering those before making your school list is important. Of course, considering financials, how much financial aid could you get? And considering how that ties into location. You might get a similar stipend in different geographical locations, but depending on cost of living, that's going to mean a very different type of lifestyle for you. And then the last two things are making sure that the alumni body lines up with where you want to go. So if you came and told us, I want to work for Apple as a software engineer, I'd want to make sure that the graduate program that you go to, their alumni, they have alumni that are working for Apple, right? Because that means that the graduate program trained them properly for a career in that company. And career development assistance, right? Making sure they have a great career center and they're going to have the resources that you need to be able to transition it onto a job after you graduate. This is the last little resource that I put up here. This is kind of what we call graduate program shopping list. This is just an example of things to consider, but this is something that you could create for yourself in Excel when you're checking out programs, and things like, profile of accepted students, the acceptance rate, accreditation status, like I mentioned, the financials of it, tuition, scholarships, financial aid, how long does it take on average for students to graduate, things like that. So with that, I just want to provide some resources, and then we have 20 more minutes for questions. So I'm really excited to be able to hear from you guys, but we have great resources on our website. Definitely make sure that you check those out. We also have a fantastic YouTube channel that has many resources for graduate school in general. We have some fantastic videos called the Demystifying Admissions series. Those series are panels of admissions directors who are telling you directly what they're looking for in students, how to be a successful applicant. So, and we have one for STEM and one for social sciences, humanities, and business. So if you want to hear, if you're like, okay, great, but I want to hear from the actual people that are going to be making these decisions, we have that on our YouTube channel. And then lastly, I mentioned several times coming to chat with us. Please do. You can make appointments with us via Handshake. We have fantastic advisors here at the Career Center that are really eager to help you through your journey of applying to graduate school, wherever you are within that journey. We do recommend that you come as early as possible during the summer because it does get so busy in the fall. But regardless, always feel free to come and see us. So with that, I think that what we'll do is we'll have, if there's any questions in the chat, I'll have Marcy pull some out. And then also feel free to just raise your hand on Zoom and we'll get to your question.
Great. Thank you so much, Alicia. And thanks to all of you that sent the questions in the chat. Just wanted to share, I know Elizabeth, and there was another question around non-STEM specific internships. And like Alicia said, a lot of these things come to like meeting with us individually because it really does depend on your end goal, right? So come meet with us so we can best strategize what makes sense for your end goal. So even looking at law school, which I help a lot with, that if when you listen to admissions advisors, they actually are less concerned about what you're specifically doing as long as you're passionate about it and that it challenges you, right? So that's law school. And then some people had mentioned, should I do research or should I have an internship? That really also depends on your end goal. So I answered Elizabeth directly in a private chat, and then I'm going to move on to the next question from Allison that says, isn't it somewhat counterintuitive to have letters of recommendation regurgitate what you've already written in your written statements? Does it add more credibility? I would think it would be may also be beneficial if recommenders can provide a different perspective. Alicia, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so of course we don't want them to fully regurgitate, and your letter writers, if they have any experience writing letters, will know that. It does provide credibility though, right? So I'm thinking of an example where perhaps you are talking about how much leadership that you took in a specific initiative that you started. It's great that you talk about that, but if we can then have the advisor of that group talk about how essential your leadership was to starting this initiative and what that led to and what that meant from their perspective, that's what adds credibility, right? And they would know to do that if they know that you mentioned this initiative, right? So, and sometimes just providing your CV can be enough. And some professors will tell you, I just want your CV. But I wouldn't worry too much about having them provide a different perspective, because in of itself, they're going to, right? Like they have a different perspective. It's just about helping prompt them to discuss the correct things, because you guys are incredibly well-rounded, brilliant students that have done so much, right? And so it can be difficult sometimes for a letter writer to know where to focus on. And that's what we mean by, kind of giving them the material so that they know what you've already mentioned.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And then there's a question about our lab courses, good experiences as well. Didn't have an internship during undergrad. I think that's more for you too, Alicia.
Yeah, so lab courses are a good start. And this, it depends which programs you're applying to, but I'm assuming you're talking about some STEM programs. So lab courses are a good start. It can be really helpful though to go apply those skills that you learned in lab courses in some kind of research position, whether that's a volunteer position in a lab, in academia or in industry, trying to get, if your goal is to go into some kind of research program, then having that research experience is quite necessary. And even if you're out of undergraduate, there's still many ways to get that research experience. And we can talk more one-on-one about what those are.
Perfect. Thanks, Alicia. Let's see. So is it bad to be leading, teaching, and doing outreach less now because I'm focused on research with a professor? I did a lot of outreach before the second year of college. Alicia, I'll turn that to you too.
Yeah, no, it's not bad, right? This is where we talk about, you can't be doing everything, right? You guys, there's only so many hours in a day. You can't be doing everything. And focusing on one thing and really going in depth is ultimately better than doing everything. And especially if you actually already have that under your belt, that's still something we're going to be able to talk about in your statements and in your application. But I think that if you're nearing the time of your application and you're going into a research focused graduate program, then you're doing the right thing by putting all of your, putting your energy towards that.
Right. Is it typically the norm for non-STEM applicants to have more leadership experience than research experience? I'm thinking about a master's or PhD in poli-sci, but wondering if no research experience will make my application look weaker. And this is what I was specifically referring to, that it really depends on the end goal, right? So that's kind of what we would need to determine in a case like this. Like do you want to be in academia? What's exactly your goal? Do you want to work in industry? So determining that, and then what makes the most sense in terms of preparation for applying to grad school. Alicia, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's correct. It's really an individual, and it's case by case, and I would focus more on what your career end goal is than it'll fit into your program end goal probably pretty naturally. Master's or PhD in poli-sci doesn't necessarily require, I would say, let me rephrase that. If you're going to do a PhD in poli-sci, I actually really would recommend getting some kind of research experience, because the PhD is 4 to 7 years of research, right? So it's going to be really important to show the admissions committee that you've done research and you know what that's like and you have some of those skills already. But other than that, I think there's so many other leadership, volunteer, internship experiences that can be very valuable to you, that's outside of research.
Perfect. All right. I think we have a couple more. Are grad school tuition fees in engineering typically covered by the PI? It is in my lab, but I'm not sure about other schools. So Alicia, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so this is going to be school and program specific as to exactly the financials of the program. And I'm going to assume you're talking about a PhD, because for a master's, it's probably unlikely that for the master's, your PI will cover it, although they might have some funding for master's students. They might. For PhD, somebody is going to cover your funding. It may be your PI. It might be an external fellowship. It might be NIH funding that's given to the programs. Your funding, typically the source of your funding when you're a PhD student, it fluctuates throughout the years. In the beginning, usually you're funded by the program, and then you might transition onto like a training grant or onto your own professor's grants. So unfortunately, we don't know exactly, but what you can feel confident is that when you are a PhD student, somebody will be paying your tuition fees.
Thanks. Okay, so who can I ask for letters of rec if I didn't build strong relationships with professors? Yeah.
And Marcy, actually, I would love to hear what you think about that too. But I mentioned that it's okay if you didn't build strong relationships with your professors. The farther out you get from undergraduate, the less your undergraduate experience will matter. So if any of these situations apply, your GPA isn't as high as you would want it to be. You don't have any professors to ask for. You didn't do research, or you didn't have an internship during your undergraduate. The farther out from your undergraduate you get, and when you're in the workforce and you're taking these gap years to get experience, the less all of that matters. And so the people that you can ask for, if you didn't have strong relationships with your professors, are your supervisors, your bosses, your mentors, anybody who has any knowledge of the work that you've done. Coworkers in volunteer experiences it's better if they're in a supervisory role, of course. What I will say is, depending on the program you're applying to, it's best if the people who write your letters have that degree, not that exact degree, but that level of degree. So if you're applying for a PhD program, it's best if your letter writers hold some kind of doctorate degree. An MD would be fine, whatever it is. The reason why that is because they're saying, this person is ready for this program and is going to be super successful in this program. And it's kind of hard to believe if they haven't gone through that program themselves, right? So as much as you can, trying to get people that have either done that master's or done that PhD or done that JD can be really helpful for getting credibility to those letters.
I think you nailed it, Alicia. I mean, and something that I also recommend too is if students have more time and they've found a professor that they've really connected with, to see if there's any way that they can do research with that professor or get connected in a deeper way to strengthen that connection. So, and we have some resources. Alicia and I actually have some sample outreach letters that you can use to reach out to professors to see if you can create opportunities with them. So, and I realize that some people may be later on and that's not a possibility. So definitely following what you had said is definitely a good idea. So, all right, I know we only have like 9 minutes left. So let's see, I've got, somebody asked about scheduling appointments with us, and thanks to Yasmin for putting the link there in Handshake. You can find us both there. And then someone said, yes, I'm referring to PhD programs, but I'm an international student, so I cannot get national grants.
Yeah, so your funding will likely come from your PI's own research funding, but I'd also recommend talking to ISPO about, they'll have knowledge of graduate student funding as well, and as well as the financial aid office. There actually are fellowship opportunities for international students at the graduate level that are available. That's not government funding. So there's still funding opportunities for international students. And as a PhD student, if you are admitted to their program, your tuition will be covered. It's just a question of finding out who is going to cover it. And that will be, you'd need to have a discussion with that particular program.
Perfect. If I missed anything, anybody in the audience, and you want to put it back in here, but I'm pretty sure that we covered everything here. And I just wanted to reiterate what Alicia said, that, you know, our goal has been really to build this library of resources, and encouraging you definitely to go to the YouTube site. Those are really well done. For any of you that are applying to law school, we have an event coming up on the 12th of April with some of the top law schools in the country with the admissions advisors. So you can actually meet with admission advisors in breakout rooms on Zoom. That is already posted in Handshake. Alicia and I last fall, I should really give all the credit to Alicia, is that she reached out to current PhD students in a variety of different programs here at UCSD. And we did an event in the fall, and you could meet with them to talk about your application. And we are looking at doing that event again in the fall. So I just want to really encourage you to keep an eye out on Handshake to meet with us, because a lot of this is very general, and in the sense of you getting it specifically focused for you. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I know Alicia can attest to this too. I mean, I've met with students sometimes 25 times for the clarity piece to really fine tune the essays. And the thing about essays, and that Alicia said too, is that you may think that you have the direction that you want, but as you get more and more details, like speaking to people that are in the program, you may decide to shift your focus, and that takes time. So you may have already been working on it for a couple months and then change direction. So you can't stress enough to that's why we, like I said, we did this now to help you get a head start on this and start mapping this out so you're way ahead of the game when it comes to application time. So Alicia, is there anything else that you wanted to add, that besides all the great info that you've already shared?
Nope, I've uploaded the presentation into the chat. So if you didn't, if you want to get, immediate access to those links and you don't want to wait, feel free to go ahead and download that. If you don't get it, don't stress, come see us at the Career Center, and we'll have this recording up on our YouTube as well. So go ahead and check that out. And thank you guys for spending your lunch with us. We appreciate you being so ahead of the game with your applications. It's going to make a really big difference when admissions comes around. So thank you all, and we'll look forward to seeing each and every one of you again when it comes time to submitting your applications.
Thank you. And I also wanted just to give a shout out to Dr. Yasmin Farley, who heads up our pre-grad group here at the Career Center. So thanks, Yasmin, for joining us today. And again, thanks to all of you. We look forward to seeing you in the future events and at an appointment too. So thanks again, Alicia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Oh, there.
You did great.